The CDC out with some new guidelines on what happens after you're vaccinated. Now, I find this interesting. It was about 12 months ago, almost to this, I think this week. 12 months ago, we were told 15 days to slow the spread. That was 12 months ago. So here we are. We're told we just got to get the vaccine and we can, it's really a shot. It's like a flu shot. It's a COVID-19 shot. We get the shot and we get back to normal. And so states are beginning to open back up. And, of course, we'll talk more about that with Asa Hutchinson next. The president calling those who are opening their states Neanderthals. That's interesting. But the CDC out with new guidelines about those who are vaccinated and what changes once you get the vaccine. I was literally shocked that they put this in writing. Well, join me now to talk more about these CDC guidelines, Dr. Andrew Bostom, clinical trialist and associate professor of family medicine at Brown University. Doctor, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
So what do you think of these new guidelines?
Well, I mean, I'm not surprised, given CDC's track record on all this. But I just wanted the point of emphasis for me is that other than people that are both vaccinated, parties that are both vaccinated, it does really very little to change the status quo.
Right.
Those are the only people that allegedly can get together without masking. Well, and it really does, since masking is it's really the talisman of all of this now, Tony. It's really important for people to understand just what we know about masking from what's been the gold standard. I've been a physical therapist and a physician now for 40 years and went from one right to the other, beginning back in 1980. And that whole period has been marked by what's called evidence-based medicine. I learned about this in both training for a PT, then working for a few years, and then going back to school for medicine. And that gold standard meant that, we were no longer going to base interventions from something as simple as a mask to something as complicated as, this remarkable development of 3 vaccines in such a short period of time. They all had to be tested by randomized controlled trials to gauge efficacy. And I can tell you that, it's not publicized any longer by the CDC. It used to be. But since 2008, there have been 12 randomized controlled trials of masking versus not masking to control respiratory viral infections. And finally, there was one that was done with COVID itself. And they share one thing in common. Every single one of them has been negative. Now, I've never heard in my now 40-year career as a healthcare professional that you take 12 years worth of negative evidence and just ignore it and then rely on rather flimsy observational studies, which were supposed to be superseded over the past 40 years by actually conducting clinical trials and basing your interventions on clinical trials. And so it's very disconcerting. And we if you want to use the standards that CDC uses, we have all kinds of observational data, Tony, which show that mask mandates have done nothing. Whether you compare states with softer or absent mandates versus those that had very rigid ones, or even within states, if you compare counties, we just don't see any difference in the infection curves and what are called the epidemic curves.
Well,
I just don't understand this. So again, it's become a like a virtue signaling thing.
It is, but I think it's about government control. I think it's conditioning for the public. But to me, I think there should be outrage with what the CDC guidelines give. You stated it, but I want the first page. I mean, I downloaded it. I'm reading it from what I downloaded.
Good.
So what changed? If you've been fully vaccinated, you can gather indoors with fully vaccinated people without wearing a mask. Well, what's the point? I mean, if you got the vaccine, or it's really a shot, it's not a vaccine, it's a shot, it keeps you from getting it, it's like the flu shot. I thought you were supposed to be protected.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, the clinical trials that have been done with the 3 major vaccines that are available, certainly in the United States now, the Pfizer, the Moderna, and the J&J vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, compared to the control groups that were in these trials. So it's pretty focused on what those trials actually were. The two, they're called mRNA vaccines, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine, give you about a 90% protection relative to the control group, as in these studies. The J&J was more like 65 to 70%. So there certainly appeared to be a benefit. But Tony, if you look now we have long-term follow-up. I just reviewed some data from around the world, from the UK, from Israel, from Germany, and even from Qatar, looking at very large cohorts of persons that had been infected in those countries' first waves and following them forward. And it's about a couple of tenths of a percent of those people that get reinfected over observational periods that extend out to 10 months. So that's at least as good as being vaccinated. So the other thing that was glaringly missing from the CDC was, what about people that have been infected and recovered?
Right.
They have, their natural immunity appears to be at least as good as the vaccine-induced immunity.
Like me. I've got that. Got the antibodies. Dr. Bostom, we're out of time, but I want to thank you for joining us, and we'll continue this conversation another day.